This incident happened to a relative of mine, and his younger cousin, and some others. Dave had a younger cousin who was being raised by her grandparents. The grandparents lived out in the country, and there was not a lot of kids her age around to hang out with, so he, Dave, and his wife would often invite her along if they were driving to the nearest city to see a movie, or play mini-golf, or something like that. It was the cousin's 13th birthday, and she wanted to have a sleepover, so it was decided it would be at Dave's house. She, the cousin, invited 5 of her closest friends. Dave and his wife were not all that mature when there were kids around. They would act like kids right along with them. Anyway, they decided later that night they would go to a graveyard. I guess it was just for a thrill or something. In our small town, the graveyards around this area are located out in the woods. This particular one was surrounded by thick woods with no houses nearby. It was small and had a chain link fence around it and a streetlight near the gate where you enter. Well, Dave and his wife and the 6 girls all exited the car and walked around the graveyard and were laughing, joking, and just chasing each other around. They also told ghost stories, trying to scare each other. They were just all around being silly. Well, they finally got tired of playing around and decided to go back to Dave's house. Well, they all went back and got into Dave's large 70s model car. The girls piled into the back, and of course, he and his wife got into the front. All the females were talking and giggling, being silly, while Dave, sitting in the driver's seat, was getting ready to crank up the car. While this was going on, they heard a tap on the driver's side window. It was not a tap like someone used their knuckles. It was more like a ting of someone using a light metal object. Everyone looked toward the window, and there was a guy standing there, and he was holding a machete. The tip of the machete was what he was using to tap the window with. Dave and his wife said that this guy was dressed like Rambo. He wasn't wearing a shirt, and had some sort of rag tied to his head, and was painted up with green and brown paint. Kind of like, I guess, army guys paint themselves up with when they go on maneuvers. Dave assumed it was possibly someone needing help, so he began opening his door to get out and talk to the guy. When he did this, he said his wife and all the girls started screaming no and diving for the door. The girls were diving over the seat and his wife across the seat. They pulled the door shut and locked it, and frantically began locking all the doors. Then the girls and Dave's wife all started screaming at Dave, saying, "Go! Let's get out of here!" and the words to that effect. While he was putting the key in the ignition, the strange guy starts doing some weird sort of like karate moves, like you might see on TV. He was spinning the machete around and doing a few kicks. Dave cranked up the car and they took off out of there. Later that night, they rode back to the graveyard to see if he was still there, and of course, this time they had the doors locked and didn't get out of the car. They thought they saw someone lying on one of the graves towards the back of the graveyard, but it could have been the trick of the lighting. We don't know to this day who this individual was. I personally believe he was either on drugs or seriously mentally ill. It creeped all of them out that this very strange guy was probably hiding in the graveyard watching them when they were walking around out there and laughing and having fun, totally oblivious to his presence. This took place 3 years ago. I used to live 3 streets over from a massive 300-acre graveyard. My neighborhood was divided into 2 sections, one of which is a grid system, and the other half is a twisty, secluded area. The graveyard spanned half of the grid system in my neighborhood, which was the area that I lived in. I had a close friend who lived 2 streets from the graveyard at the other end. We spent almost every Saturday at each other's houses, mostly sleeping over. This night, at around 3 in the morning, I woke up his mom by laughing. She came downstairs and kicked me out. Normally, when I left his house, I would walk to my house on the street at the bottom of the cemetery. It was a straight shot to my house. As I was walking, I heard what sounds like a cat in a huge amount of pain coming from inside the graveyard. I decided to go try and find it so I can possibly help it out. I can tell it's pretty far inside the cemetery. I hop the fence and begin looking. I get to the center of the graveyard and I can tell that I'm about 30 to 40 yards away from the cat by now. By this point, the cat was screeching and howling. It didn't sound like it moved since I first heard it crying in the street. As I closed in on the spot I thought it was in, the screeching just stopped. I stopped in my tracks and something felt very off to me. Then a guy wearing a hood walked out from behind a tomb about 50 feet in front of me. After a few seconds of staring at each other, he makes the cat noise, and I gasp, and he starts to run right at me. I turn around and take off sprinting. I look over my shoulder after maybe 30 seconds of running, and he has stopped chasing me and is now walking back towards the tomb. I make it out of the cemetery, jogging home now, and after about a minute, I hear the cat noises start up again. This happened around 10 to 12 years ago, and I completely forgot about it until now. It's a short story, but at the time, absolutely terrified me. When I was younger, my whole block was filled with kids from my age. At the time, around 9 and 11. I can't exactly remember when it was. And we would all play around the neighborhood near a cemetery that is right near my house. We all used to play until after dark, playing games like Ghost in the Graveyard, literally, and Tag, and all that fun stuff. So it wasn't uncommon for us to be unattended around the block. It is a relatively safe neighborhood, and I still live in the same house, so I'm surprised this even happened. This particular day, my friend and I, she was 2 years younger than me, decided to go look at the gravestones in the cemetery. We went in there and started browsing, amazed by the dates. We were preoccupied, so we didn't see the man who was walking aimlessly alone in the cemetery, not looking at any graves in particular, just walking. I eventually saw him and told my friend that we should start heading back home, because he was a bit creepy and we were scrawny little girls. We began to head home, and just as we were, this older woman stops us and says, "You girls shouldn't come in here. There are creeps that walk through here," and gave a knowing and creepy smile. We said, "Sorry, we were just playing," and went on our way. When we got back to our houses, we continued playing in the front yard, doing what little girls do, and suddenly, I look up and see the same man from the cemetery. I was a little creeped out, but didn't know at the time that this was something to watch out for. He started coming up towards us, trying to talk to us, and we just kept playing and running around like we didn't see him, and eventually we went to my backyard so we could feel a little bit safer. An hour or so later, we think it is safe to venture back to the front yard, and we see him just sitting on my curb. I can now see that he wasn't dressed nicely, and maybe he hadn't taken a bath in a while, and despite it being summer, he had a hat on, kinda like a beanie. We got really creeped out at this point, and went to tell our moms. My friend's dad came out and shoos him away, and we think that was it. Another hour goes by, and we see the same man standing by our neighbor's backyard, which is visible from the street, trying to pet, I think, their dogs. We run in and tell her dad again, and he orders us to stay inside. We watched interested from the window, and God, I wish I hadn't. My best friend's dad runs across the street just in time to see the man standing near the same yard with a bite from the dog on one hand and the dog itself dead in the other. He ran down the alley just before my friend's dad could reach him. Our parents called the police, but I don't think he was ever found. About 2.5 years ago, I was at my friend's house. There were 4 of us, me, B and D, who were brothers, and T. We were at B and D's house late one night on a winter break. It was around December 2010 or January 2011. I don't remember exactly. We were just having a chill night, playing some video games and hanging out since there was like a foot of snow on the ground and there wasn't much to do in the region we live in anyway. We were all always interested in the afterlife. We have no idea what happens when we die, but it's a subject that really fascinated us. It's fun to think about and talk about. The discussion naturally leads to ghosts and spirits. Eventually, we decided to go to an isolated graveyard on the outskirts of town to see if it was haunted. 'Cause, face it, we didn't have anything better to do anyways. The legend was that anyone who was buried in that cemetery was a gypsy, and there hasn't been any other burials there since the 1920s. So, it's an old semi-abandoned graveyard. Great! We get into the car and drive to the graveyard. At this point, it was around 2 a.m. Let me describe the layout of this graveyard a little bit so it makes some sense. It's on a quiet, wooded road with very little traffic and not much light, other than the moon. Going north on the road, the cemetery is on the right side with a patch of grass on the left side, just big enough to fit my tiny-ass car. At the same time, a car passed me in the other lane. I think it was a Jeep, but I didn't think much of it, just that it was odd. But we quickly forgot about it, excited to hopefully get the shit scared out of ourselves. We park and briefly think, what the hell are we gonna do to an abandoned 130-year-old gypsy graveyard at 2 in the morning, before getting out of the car and crossing the street to the graveyard. There's a small staircase that leads up to the graveyard. This area is pretty hilly, the whole road is. We climb the stairs and go back to the rickety gate up to the yard. T brought a voice recorder so him and B head towards the back of the cemetery to try and catch some spirits and whatnot. They're probably around 15 to 20 yards away from me and D. Meanwhile, me and D are just talking, marveling at how creepy this place is. Once again, questioning why we're here, when we saw a set of lights coming up the road. It was the same Jeep. It was a late 90s Jeep and was white. It parks in the road adjacent to the cemetery, blocking my car. Whoever was in there rolls down the window and blasts some weird, satanic sounding music and just stayed inside. We all froze. He stays there for probably 30 seconds with creepy ass music playing, but I swear it felt like 30 minutes. This is where we die, I thought to myself. And then he just drove off. Naturally, you'd think we'd leave after this. However, me and my friends are sometimes, well, stupid. So we just ignored it and went back to looking for something at the graveyard worth seeing. Then the car makes another pass, honking his horn as he flies by. This is where we had the collective "oh shit" moment. Quickly scurried back to my car and we got stuck. Remember, my tiny car, 1 foot of snow on the ground, parked in the grass. We got unstuck somehow, and I got us onto the road, accelerator to the floor. We drove probably about 5 miles with no sightings of this dude. I thought we were finally in the clear. We think we lost him, and then, suddenly, a pair of headlights turns on the road behind us. He was following us for who knows how long with his lights off. And we had no idea he was there. Suddenly, he pulls into the oncoming lane, matches our speed and drives right next to us. He threw something at my car, and I still have no idea what it was, but I heard it hit. It didn't leave any dents or scratches, so who really knows what it was? And then sped up and got right in front of us, far enough ahead so that it looks like he was gonna leave us alone. Nope. He slams onto his brakes and slows way down, almost causing an accident. I react fast enough to go around him and get us onto a smaller road closer to town, finally managing to lose him, and we head back to the house, scared. We had no idea what had happened that night. Maybe it was just an asshole driver, maybe it was just teenagers screwing around, or maybe he was a total psychopath. This was a few years ago. Funny enough, it was on Halloween. A friend and I were driving around, really just passing time and enjoying the rich kid part of town, where they really try their hardest to show off their money by the number of decorations, fog machines, lights, sounds, music, the whole 9 yards. As we drove down the street, we ended up getting to a row of houses with the lights turned off. Not a single light, save for the mood light and our car lights. That street was usually blacked out with the exception of one house, an older man who would always go all out for their every holiday. It was as creepy as can be. Skeletons, a witch in the background, some odd chants, and laughter. My friend saw that he had a Take One Bowl candy bowl with full-size candy bars in front of his yard, so he parks the car and gets out. I follow him past the mock graveyard and walk up to the bowl, and as he reaches into it, BAM! A little hand pops from it and makes him jump. He literally runs back to the car as I laugh and I grab a bar for myself and head back to the car. When I realize something, those chants and other noises weren't from here. I let my friend know as I get in, and we decide to drive further in. He notes that there's a little graveyard that's open all night, so we decide to check it out. It takes a second to get there, but when we did, we could hear the chants better and very faintly see some lights. We turn our own lights off and slowly drive up. As we enter, I get a very odd feeling. Halloween night in a graveyard? This is how the movie starts, but we had a car and are big enough to take down a big guy or two, let alone a couple of emo kids trying to summon a demon or something. But as we finally see it, we see them. A group of people wearing robes, dancing and chanting around a fire. Not just like a little twig fire, no, firewood and logs, heavy dancing, 5-foot-tall fire. The people around it were dark-skinned with paint on the face of one older woman. As she chanted, she tossed something in the fire, and then, out of seemingly nowhere, pulled out a chicken. It was either already dead or had just been killed. Either way, it was very limp and had no movement of its own. At the same time, we both just looked at each other in shock. More so laughter than fear, we chuckled to ourselves. She heard us and turned her head as slowly as possible and stared right at us. We had no clue if she knew or had a sixth sense, but she stared for at least 10 full seconds and then smiled at us and waved us over. My friend was in fuck this mode. He took it off out of the park and we went to the car and he floored it. But nothing happened. Literally almost no noise, like the engine stalled or something. So yeah, this is where the movie says, based on a true story. One of the men with white paint on his face takes a look at us and waves us also over. Like he wanted us to join them, but then the car finally woke up and we got the fuck out of there, not looking back for a second. So, crazy occultist people trying to raise the dead or whatever? Let's not meet